Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This episode has been brought to you by the Wine to Wine Business Forum 2022. This year will mark the 9th edition of the forum to be held on November 7th and 8th of 2022 in Verona, Italy. This year will be an exclusively in-person edition. The main theme of the event will be all-round wine communication, and tickets are on sale now. The second early bird discount will be available until September 18th. For more information, please visit us at winetowine.net.
Thanks for tuning in to Get U.S. Market Ready with Italian Wine People on the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm Steve Raye, your host, and this podcast features interviews with the people actually making a difference in the Italian wine market in America, their experiences, challenges, and personal stories. And I'll be adding a practical focus to the conversation based on my 30 years in the business. So if you're interested in not just learning how, but also how else, then this pod is for you. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Get U.S. Market Ready with Italian Wine People. I'm Steve Raye, your host, and my guest this week is Max de Zarobe of Avignonesi. Max, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me there. It's a pleasure.
The name is very familiar to me for a couple of reasons, but I'm sure for a lot of my listeners, Avignonesi is, maybe they're not familiar with it. Can you give us a little background of the company? And we're going to get into a lot of conversations on some subjects, but give us a kind of a point of reference on the company.
Yeah, I mean, Avignonesi, it's actually a very old family from Tuscany, and they were producing wine here for ages in Montepulciano. And in the 70s, early 70s, I think in 74, it became really an enterprise in a company. It was kind of family business originally, and then it was actually run by the in-laws of the Avignonesi family. And it became very famous for two reasons. First of all, the Vinsanto, because I think the Vinsanto from Avignonesi is known all over the world. Even the French consider that as a great sweet wine. And also, of course, because of the Nobile, which, the Vino Nobile is the workhorse of Montepulciano and of Avignonesi. So that's, in a few words, the history. Now, to understand what I'm doing there is just that my wife bought the winery in 2009. She was a silent partner before, but in 2009 she took over all the shares. And since May 2009, we are at the helm of Avignonesi. To give you an idea, Avignonesi has about 440 acres of vineyard planted, and our production in terms of bottles, branded Avignonesi, is around 400 to 600,000 bottles according to the vintage. But a large quantity of our production is actually sold in bulk.
Oh, really? I didn't.
About 40%, yes.
And how much is exported to the U.S.?
U.S. is our number one market in every aspect. First of all, because as such, I mean, a large amount of our wine is exported. I think 75% of our production is exported. And the United States are number one there in terms of country. I'm taking about, I would say, a big chunk, about 30%. And then we have to take into consideration that whatever we sell in Italy is actually bought by Americans. And we got the evidence of that because of COVID. Because when the Americans disappeared from the peninsula, our sales in Italy dropped by 75%.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea how important is the American market for us, because even our domestic market is driven by Americans.
That's the first time I've heard anybody say anything like that, but that's a good piece of data. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, this is something which I've been saying since day one, but nobody believed me. And unfortunately, when COVID came, we had to realize that, I was right, unfortunately, I would say. But it is clear that, either we sell wine here at the winery, ex-cellar, at cellar door, or we sell to the restaurants, but the restaurants, they sell to the American tourist, because Italian people will drink Vino Nobile in Tuscany, But the fact that we sell some Vino Nobile in Naples or in Rome or whatever demonstrate that actually, this is not local people drinking that. Otherwise, they would drink the local wine. So it's America who is our number one market, domestically and internationally.
And who's your importer in the U.S.?
We are our own importers. We do that ourselves since already 11 years. So we jump one.
So it's Avignonesi USA, or what's the name of the company?
Avignonesi USA.
Okay. And do you have people resident in the U.S.?
4.5 people working full time for us. Yes. Yeah. We jump one of the three tiers. So we talk directly to the distributors. We distributed in 39 states, and the most important ones.
And are you aligned with any one or few particular distribution companies?
One of our big distributors is Winebow Distribution. Yes, definitely, it's number one for us. They represent 65% of our distribution in the States, which is not bad. It's a big chunk.
Great company. I've been familiar with the portfolio and their Italian wines, and their they were big in Austrian wines too. I had a lot of experience working there, so they're good to hear that. Okay, so you mentioned Montepulciano. I'm just going to open the door because I think you're used to answering this question. What is the difference between Vino Nobile de Montepulciano and other Sangiovese Chianti from Tuscany?
Yeah, I mean, talk Sangiovese. It's a difficult question because let's put it that way. I'm not convinced that the DOCGs, the way they are conceived in Italy, it's something which is perceived clearly by the Americans. As you probably know, they are a copy of what was created by the French in 1855, but it happened 125 years later in Italy, and something was lost in translation. So when you talk about Sangiovese, Sangiovese is so biotope sensitive by its own characteristics that trying to frame it into a denomination is a bit of a nonsense, because the Sangiovese from that row and the Sangiovese from this row are completely different, even if they are 3 feet apart. This is something that has to be taken into consideration. So what we have to consider when we talk about Sangiovese is Tuscany in general, as a whole, because nowhere else on earth they have been able to produce a great Sangiovese. This is the only place you can find fantastic Cabernet Sauvignon all over the planet, including Tuscany. We've been able to copy wines from others, but the paradox is this: no one can copy what we do, because it's impossible to grow Sangiovese outside of central Italy. Actually, if you tell me that there are some areas in Umbria where they have a fantastic Sangiovese, the locals will answer, yes, but this territory you're talking about used to be Tuscany 200 years ago. So this is it.
Okay. Well, let me interrupt and ask a question here. Is there a parallel to any other variety in any other country to Sangiovese being so definitive? And I would think Grüneveltliner, as an example, would be for Austria. It is grown in other places. Blaufränkisch, too. They're growing Lemberger in upstate New York. Yeah.
This is another one. I would agree with you. Let's be honest. I think that the Sangiovese, all the trials that have been done around the world, and more specifically in America, and particularly in California, were a flop. And it never came out the way. Because, I mean, let's put it that way. Sangiovese plays at home here. The homeland of Sangiovese is Tuscany. So trying to frame something which is so biotope sensitive into kind of DOCGs that are very often actually limited to administrative divisions, like a town, which ignore completely or disregards pedology or climate, is a bit of a nonsense. So I think that if I have to explain to the consumers what is the Sangiovese, I think they have to look at it from a kind of broad way, in a kind of take a certain distance, a certain perspective, and look at it from a wine from Tuscany with its diversities, clearly. I mean, you were talking about Chianti. Chianti has a higher elevation, So the climate is colder. The wines will have a general characteristics, more acidity that the Nobile. The Brunello will be closer to the sea, and will have I would say, a more temperate climate, and therefore give wines with probably a heavier body. And but this is a caricature, of course. And Montepulciano is a little bit more continental, a bit further away from the sea, and therefore it's a kind of in between, light body and a bit of acidity. Voila. But again, this is a caricature because I mean, we you could find fantastic wines here or there that are in denominations like Montecucco or Morellino di Scansano, which are fantastic. It has nothing to do, as long as it comes from Tuscany, it's good.
Okay, but let's cut to the chase. There's some confusion in the world, and I think you've done a really good job in the pieces I've seen of explaining it. Confusion between what Montepulciano, Vino Nobile de Montepulciano, is compared to Chianti, and why Brunello has become this worldwide, and certainly in the U.S., a sensation, higher priced wine, all that kind of stuff, and that has not happened to Vino Nobile. And there's some contradictions in the name of the town. So maybe you can kind of give us that perspective. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I used to say as a kind of joke that we are squeezed between the rock and the hard place. The rock is Brunello, because it's famous in the United States for plenty of reasons, because the Mariani family played an important role in distributing it in the United States, specifically during the period of the lira, which was, of course, a fantastic and easy job, because your costs were in a kind of, monkey money, and your income was in solid
monkey
dollars. So,
money.
of course, but that was monkey money. You know that. That was peanuts. I mean, so basically it was a very easy thing to do, and they took the momentum and they did it very well. And I can only but pay tribute to this fantastic job they've done there. But it would be impossible to repeat that with a euro.
Well, and especially now with the euro at parity. I haven't looked at what it was this week, but last week it did.
It's about parity, yes, indeed. So forget it. I mean, this is possible when you know that from Monday to Friday, the value of the lira has dropped by 10 or 15% compared to the dollar in less than a week. Then it's an easy game. So that's the first problem we have. This is the rock, and the hard place is the fact that Montepulciano has a namesake, which is Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. But Montepulciano d'Abruzzo has nothing to do with the town Montepulciano where I'm speaking from. Abruzzo, it's a province which is in central East Italy, and that produces wine on its own, and the name of the grape is Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. So you may find Montepulciano d'Abruzzo produced in Australia, New Zealand, um, Argentina, everywhere, because that's the name of the grape. But from Montepulciano town, there is only one wine. Is the wine from Montepulciano, which is the Nobile or the Rosso, or ultimately the Vinsanto. But I mean, the fact that, of course, they have the same name and they sound identical is confusing people, and particularly the consumers. I think professionals in America are able to tell the differences, no problem. But I put myself in the shoes of a consumer who is facing a shelf in a wine shop or in supermarket, and sees next to each other a bottle at $6 and a bottle at $30 with the same name on it. So they are a bit puzzled. They say, why is there such a big difference between two wines that are supposed to be the same, but they are not the same at all? They're completely different. So Montepulciano town has been trying to obtain from European, I would say, authorities, the fact that they would be recognized as the only one able to use the name Montepulciano, but we failed completely. We failed completely because we were not supported by the Italians' politics. Because, of course, Montepulciano is a small town with 18,000 people living there, probably 15,000 voters, and Abruzzo is a province with 2.2 million people living there, and of course, carries much more weight politically than we do. So we've been a little bit abandoned there. Let's be honest, Abruzzo has been really victim of many earthquakes in the past, and this is an area which really needed some support from the government. So it was difficult to crucify them. So when you put everything together, We realized that it was a lost cause. So the only thing we could do is talk to the American consumers through people like you to explain that they should be able to discriminate. One small town which produces about 10 million bottles of Nobile per year, and that ages for 3 years, and so on and so on, with I would say a rather strict rules, and the 120 million bottles per year. So we're talking about two different things, and then we're not playing in the same league, because of course they can sell wine at $7 or $8. We cannot. This is our production cost. So that's where I think it's important for the consumer to discriminate one and the other. It's important. But I mean, the same thing. I mean, as an example, I remember I was at a restaurant next to the winery, a friend of mine, and there were some American guys there. And the owner of the restaurant, who spoke a few words of English, was asking them, "Where are you from?" And they say, "Washington." "Oh, yeah." I say, "Then have you seen the president?" They say, "No, no, we are in Washington." So the same thing applies in America. It's just a matter of explaining that to people. And the same way that Italians made no difference between Washington and DC, the same way probably American consumers make a confusion between two namesake wines that are completely different and come from different areas.
Okay, so one of the areas of being different is the word nobile in there. Can you explain the history of that?
Yeah, Nobile is actually a wonderful word. So we wanted to name the wine Nobile, period. But it happens that it's an adjective, and according to European rules, you cannot use an adjective to name a wine, because otherwise people will use the word prestigious or wonderful or whatever. So we had to attach Vino Nobile di Montepulciano all together to be able to maintain the word Nobile as registered as a trademark in the European community. So that's why it's so long, so unpronounceable. But in reality, the true name that the Italians would use is Vino Nobile, but Vino doesn't add anything to the story because we know it's wine. Otherwise, it's just enough to see the bottle. But the word is Nobile. And Nobile means noble, and which is actually a very positive word. And why is it called Nobile? Because actually that was the wine that was sold to the aristocracy during centuries, since I would say the Renaissance until the beginning of the 20th century. European aristocracy in general, and even great names of wine lovers in America, like Jefferson, would drink Nobile. That's what they would prefer as European wine after the French or together with the French. Actually, the perfect example is when you talk about Voltaire as a French writer, talking about Candide coming back from the El Dorado, loaded with money. What do you think he drinks? He drinks no Lafitte Rothschild. He drinks Vino Nobile. That's what the way it was perceived in the 18th century. Even the French would consider the Nobile as being top wine in Europe. Unfortunately, time has passed, and the Brunello has taken the lead, and we were among the three first DOCGs of Italy, together with Barolo and Brunello, and we seem to have slipped into a kind of shadow, or we have been overshadowed by our neighbors. But still, the terroir is there. Still, the climate is there, and this is actually Montepulciano is certainly the mother of all Tuscan fine wines historically, and it's the cradle of the Sangiovese.
And yet, when I think about from from an American perspective, Monte Vino Nobile de Montepulciano, on one hand, and Brunello de Montalcino are no harder or easier to pronounce one than the other. And yet there's this tremendous awareness of Brunello, and it's in a very similar situation. What is the region that produces, or the area that produces, or the producers who represent, including you guys, the dominant visible brands of Vino Nobile in the United States? What are you guys doing to change the perception or to educate American consumers of these facts?
We create. I mean, we have of course an institution which is the consortium, but it's rather weak and disorganized. Um, Recently, it has improved a lot, but during the last 20 years, it's been extremely silent and inefficient. Therefore, that's why we've been overshadowed by our neighbors, because we didn't have anybody there that could speak English, which I think it's important when, a large amount, if not most of what we produce is exported to the United States. So that we had a lack of competence, clearly. But the institutions are being renovated. There is a new president, which has given a new impulse, and then there's some efforts which have been made and which I think are very positive. So I'm still, it's an institution. It's not a private entity, so it's always slow. It's something which will evolve, but it's not a rocket. Then we created a little group where we have five producers, which we consider being, good friends, and we do events together. And that it's Boscarelli, Poliziano, Salcheto, Antinori, and Avignonesi. I would say all these names are well known in the American market because we are everywhere there, and we try as much as we can to promote the denomination, and I think that to some extent this is probably an easier way to act because it's a lighter structure. And we do small events. We did a couple of events in the past in the United States, another one in Milan. But of course, we should do more. And yeah, we're working on it, definitely. I mean, I think these are the two groups that are working for the denomination. And then, of course, each producer individually does his job to promote the denomination. Yes, definitely.
So, as a parallel to that, I think of Amarone and the historic families, or the 13 historic families.
The relationship between the alliance and the consortio are completely pacified. There is no conflict at all between the two of them. Actually, the consortio has entrusted me, being the leader of the alliance, to do the communication with the United States. So they realize that there are some synergies, and it's easier for the consortio to use the alliance sometimes to penetrate the American market, because they do things, but they rely on public funds. And relying on public funds in Italy, it's always a very bureaucratic and complex matter. So the action is always somehow hindered by this kind of bureaucracy, and they need something lighter. So, we are in charge of that for the denomination. So it's a kind. We don't have this kind of discussions of who's the boss of the communication at all. There is a perfect understanding that we're sharing the same objective.
So you've got some super powerful brands there, yours and Antinori, just to name two that you mentioned, that have visibility, recognition, clout, credibility, legacy, heritage, authenticity, all that kind of stuff. So whatever has happened in the past hasn't gotten you where you need to be. And now we're in an environment, call it post-COVID. I think it's going to be post during COVID because it's not going away, where we're seeing a transition to new audiences. The audience that in the past you guys have been trying to communicate to was my generation of baby boomers. And the reality is, yeah, we still represent the largest consumption of fine wine in the US, but we're also dying off. And that's the reality. You have two new generations, millennials and Gen Z coming, who don't have any of the baggage that my generation has, who may have recently discovered for themselves things like Brunello, and that Vino Nobile di Montepulciano can fall into the same category of discovery. How are you reaching this new audience? And as a part of that question, I would ask, what are the tools you're using? In particular, I'm thinking about social media, because that's where this audience communicates and touches wine.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we use social media and we use it a lot. Listening in, Marina, that is a young lady who works for us as an intern, is 24. she's in charge of this communication under the supervision of Xiao and myself. But who is on the front line is every year a young lady in her 20s that comes as an intern and that we renew every year. So we always keep somebody talking to the social media that is in its 20s. And I think it's very important because they feel the mood. They actually watch TikTok, they know exactly what is fashionable, they know what's the music to put as a background. You know, of course, the message is something which is issued by the management, of course, but the expression has to be performed by somebody young and pleasant that make people dream. I know this morning, for instance, Marina showed me a little video that she shot with other of our young trainees. They had a picnic in the vineyard at the sunset yesterday, and they shot a little reel or a little TikTok video which she wanted to post, and I said, "This is exactly what we want. This is Let's people dream about Tuscany."
Absolutely. Those are the pictures that work in the wine magazines, and everybody wants to, oh, I want to have that dinner in the vineyard. I don't know how they get the food to them hot, but still in all, it's beautiful. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely, and and when you see four young ladies, they're enjoying life, having a glass of wine and a picnic. That's exactly what we do. Whether it works, hopefully yes, but you never know because I mean, social media is like throwing a bottle in the sea. You never know who's going to pick it up.
I would argue that point, and I think that's one of the, frankly, I don't mean this to be insulting, but fundamental problems that our generation, if I can include you in mind, a baby boomer, doesn't recognize. There's a million metrics.
Yes, please. I mean, I'm 65, so I'm probably older than you are.
You're not. Anyway. So my philosophy on marketing to people like that is instead of getting them to come to you, go where they're already gathered. So there is a very large wine community around sites and tools like Vivino, like VinePair, like Wine Searcher when they're trying to gather information. And a lot of these entities are now populating content that effectively is evergreen because once it's up, it stays there. And the big issue that I have and have done audits of this, I'll share a quote with you. Mike Osborne, who's the guy who runs or runs wine.com, says only 5% of the wines sold on wine.com are what I would call optimized, meaning they have high resolution images, they have the logo in black and white on black, in color, various aspect ratios and resolutions, and AI and EPS and all those kinds of things. Because if anybody's going to be doing anything to promote your brand or the area or the type of wine, they need to have access to assets. Okay. So having an optimized set of assets is probably the most important tool. I know I'm shouting on a promontory here, and I tell this to people all the time. It doesn't cost much money at all. It's something your intern and internal staff can do. It's evergreen in terms of value, but it's not something that everybody does. Now, I haven't done an audit of the category of Vino Nobile producers. I have looked at yours though, and you're in pretty good shape. But I think the group needs to work on something like that, and that could be something that the consortio could do because it fits within their remit, doesn't benefit one winery versus another, but it fills the advertising component of what OCM or EU agricultural funded money is. Is that anything you guys are working on? Are you aware of that? Is that a priority for you?
I mean, this is definitely something that I'm going to bring to the next meeting of the alliance because I think it's important that we do it. I think we will talk to the consortium about it, but it's going to be a slower process. Now, we went through the exercise. Xiao, as you know, is in charge of that. She's, adamant to have things done properly.
Yeah,
And we've
I
we've
know
seen
that.
the wine searcher and so forth. Everything has been cleaned up, has been trimmed. There's a consistency between the message in one and the message on the other, even if they are slightly different because they address different kind of people. But yeah, we are very very, I would say, curating this aspect of communication, and Xiao has been doing an admirable job there. I have to say, she's the one who's been cleaning that completely because it was a mess. Let's be honest. I mean, when you produce wine, you so much focused on what you do that sometimes you neglect the most important thing is to communicate what you do to the people who are supposed to buy it. And you invest so much effort and so much money in production that sometimes you forget the most important thing is that you need to find somebody to buy your wine, because otherwise you're not going to drink it on your own. So you have to communicate.
I saw a great quote this morning in the news. And I forget who it was, but it was somebody from Chile. And they said, making great wine is easy, selling wine is hard. And you're right. So what are you guys doing with the American trade, who are really the middlemen between your communications and consumers to some degree, to educate them, whether it's staff at wine and spirit shops, whether it's Psalms is kind of it's an interesting challenge now post COVID, because a lot of people lost their jobs and that role has changed a lot. But on premise obviously is very important for you guys. What are you doing to impact the trade? Now, I'm not talking consumers now, but the trade who has to tell this story to their customers, who are your ultimate buyer.
We are a little bit peculiar in the sense that we are only importers, right? So, but we don't spend money in ads on Wine Advocate or Wine Spectator. We are too small anyway, so we wouldn't carry enough weight to be attractive there. What we've decided to do is to create a team, which it's 4.5 people working for us. Two are based in New York. One is in Florida. Another one in California, and half-time guy working for us in Texas. And these guys, what do? They go along with the sales reps. They actually teach the sales reps. They explain what we are to the sales reps. And with the sales reps, they go and visit the customers. And then they talk about what we do. And, they have the wine tasted and so on with an explanation. Bear in mind, you're a sales rep. You are, I don't know, 35 or 45. You got a book in your hand with something like 1200 SKU. How long can you talk about it to a guy who is in a restaurant and has people queuing in front of his door to actually push wine that he doesn't want to buy? So you need to find someone who is a kind of support for the sales rep, that it reminds to the guy that he has a product that is talking about Avignonesi, which is certified organic, certified biodynamic, vegan, which it's estate bottle, because of course every single wine we produce is produced exclusively with our own grapes, and so on and so on, at a price that, when you compare to other equivalent Tuscan Sangiovese, is a third of what you would pay a Brunello. That's basically what we do on a daily basis. And what we've seen is that, our sales have been growing steadily, COVID, no COVID, throughout the years, nonstop. But we can see that by the amount of sales we made in the United States, and we see that growing, that figures, a turnover growing year after year. And during the COVID, these guys that we have on the spot have been able actually to shift the action from the on trade to the off trade in, in in no time, because of course the demand was there. You see, the main difference we've observed between United States and China regarding COVID is that the day China was hit by COVID, everything stops, because Chinese would drink wine on banquets or occasions or gatherings or whatever, but they will never actually buy a bottle of wine and drinking, watching the equivalent of Netflix. That would never happen. So the market collapsed. In America, there's this habit to drink wine. You come from the office, you're tired, you want to enjoy yourself at a nice dinner with your wife, you just grab a bottle. And if you don't go to the restaurant, you do a curbside pickup and you bring the bottle at home and you drink it there. And actually, the demand didn't budge, actually grew. And we've been selling much more than what we would have expected during the COVID, but on a completely different channel. as if the river had moved into another place, but the flow was remaining the same. Yeah.
That's my point. Right. Where the industry's different, the customers are different, the way it's purchased, it's different, where it's purchased and consumed are different than what they were before. And with everything changing, you have to change some of the things that you do. Let me ask you a question. Are you familiar with an entity or two entities? Now they're the same entity, but 750 is one and the other is Provi.
Yeah, we work with them. Now it's Provi, of course. We've been one of the first ones to actually join Provi, the very first one, to be honest. Yes, we work with these guys. This is very important for the American market because this is a platform that I would say most of the professionals are using today, and they will, in my opinion, they will use it more and more. That simplifies their life, makes it easier. That digitalized part of the work which was done, I would say, with this usual trolley and the six bottles in it, which is a little bit old fashioned. And I've done that. I've run this business personally myself because when I go to the state, I do the job with my staff because I want to understand how it works. Um, you have to do everything from the soil to the customer. You've got to see the journey. And what I understand is that there is a change thanks to these kind of new platforms, and we basically, I remember when I traded with the young lady who was in charge of the ads in Provi, we were among probably the first people to actually call them and say we want to work with you guys in this new platform.
Excellent. Good. Good. Well, I ask, it was a leading question because I feel strongly that that's the kind of point, an inflection point where you can influence a whole lot of people very efficiently. It was the reason why we, in my former agency, we were one of the largest trade advertisers, and Bev Media was so important because everybody used the beverage books. Well, that now has become 750, and now Provi has bought 750 and there are other tools and services that get added to it. But in all cases, you're dealing with the people who make the decisions at the point of time when they're doing the buying. And the parallel to that is label recognition technology on Wine Searcher and also on Vivino, so that when somebody scans a bottle of wine and they're physically in the store, you know two things. One, they're interested in it, and two, they can actually buy it at that point in time, generally speaking. Those are powerful opportunities that I don't see people really taking advantage of. It's wonderful to hear that you're working with Provi. I see them doing some wonderful things. In fact, I'm going to be interviewing the Taylor Katz, the president, in an upcoming event. All right, let me kind of bring this to a close. Vino Nobile de Montepulciano is one of my favorite wines. I know personally it's a challenge to explain it to people, and I know it about as well as I think most journalists do who aren't, Psalms and things like that. You guys are doing a bunch of stuff, which is great, leading the pack. Of what we talked about, what is the one thing the trade, and recognize most of the listeners to this show are the trade, what is the one thing the trade can put to use immediately to help with your mission to grow the category of Vino Nobile de Montepulciano forward?
That's actually a difficult one. Shift paradigm. I think that the American professionals should actually shift paradigm. They should start. There's a misperception about the Vino Nobile. It's actually quite funny. You sent me this little document where you said the questions that were to be asked and so on, and I read. You're talking about the different rules of the Nobile, and the American would say there is a minimum of 70% of Sangiovese in the Nobile, right? We don't say that here. We say there is a faculty to blend up to 30% of another grape variety in the Nobile. And this is where, the misunderstanding is we don't need to put Merlot in the Sangiovese. We don't need to put Cabernet Sauvignon. We don't need to put anything else. We could put Canaiolo if we want, because it's a local thing, or we can put Mamolo, which is quite interesting because it's another, I would say, autochthonous grape. But of course, the king of Tuscany is Sangiovese. So if you produce a good Sangiovese in Montepulciano, why would you blend it with something else? So I think what is important is to see that if actually we produce 100% Sangiovese in Montepulciano, why is it that 1 acre of Montalcino costs 10 times more than 1 acre of Montepulciano?
I think that's an existential question for you.
No, it is not an existential question for me. Absolutely not. And again, this is just the opposite, because when you are in the trade, what are you interested in buying? Something when you realize that you buy it at a cheaper price that is net asset value. Otherwise, you're not a buyer, you're a seller. All right. And what I see is that the American trade is buying what they should sell, and they don't buy what they should buy.
Wow. Can you explain that another way? This is very interesting.
What I'm trying to say, I'm a trader, right? By nature. All right. I was not born in the wine business.
Right. You came from shipping, I believe, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're shipping freight. We trading freight. So there's a price you buy and the price you sell. So when you have a commodity, which is the Tuscan Sangiovese, why would you pay 3 times the price what you can get for a third? It's a nonsense. So people say, yeah, you say that. I mean, this is a typical reply. Yeah, but because you're the victim, you've been overshadowed. No, the victim is the poor guy who pays 3 times the price what he could pay a third. He's the victim.
The American consumer, you're talking.
He doesn't know it, but I do know, and I can prove it. Yeah, the consumers and the professional, because there is a margin to make, and of course, you realize that there is a price ratio between two products that are comparable. And again, I mean, nothing against Brunello, because I drink a lot of it. I mean, Stella di Campelto is for me probably the best Sangiovese you can find in the world. All right, so it's not even. Yeah, I live in Montalcino actually, and I work in Montepulciano, so I'm a keen Brunello drinker. But I do realize that if I to invest money today, what do I buy? Clearly, I buy Montalcino. No, I buy Montepulciano, because then there is a possibility that actually the spread between the two narrows. And that's what we're betting on. Any trader would bet on a narrowing spread between Brunello and Nobile.
Okay. I get it. All right. We could talk for hours. And actually, I think we did the last time. But my guest this week is Max de Zarobe, who is the principal, along with his wife, Virginie Saverys of Avignonesi Winery. And we've been talking about Vino Nobile de Montepulciano this week. Max, thank you very much for being on the show. I appreciate your sharing the time.
No, I mean, I should be the one thanking you for giving me this opportunity. It was really a great time, and thank you so much for your interest in Avignonesi.
Well, you're welcome. Let me answer my own question about what's the big takeaway. That everybody should be selling Vino Nobile de Montepulciano, not against Brunello or not against any Chiantis, but simply because it's a good deal, and the sellers, restaurants as well as the retail stores, can make more money doing so.
You're right. Let me add just one thing. Everybody tells you should never compare your wine with your neighbors, because you should actually promote its intrinsic qualities. Wrong, because the whole profession does comparison. The simple fact that you have a score means that it's a competition. So this is, in my opinion, this is also something which has to change. Everybody I talk to regarding the Nobile, one way or another, explicitly, implicitly, refers to the two other wines from Tuscany that are based on Sangiovese. It has never happened to me that I had a conversation with a journalist, with a trader, talking about the Vino Nobile without having the Brunello sent back to my face. And this is why I think that we should be very clear about it. There is no difference between one and the other. They are very good wines in both cases. And the main difference between the Brunello and the Nobile is the price.
And that should be a very appealing selling message to American consumers and the trade, for that matter. So once again, Max, thank you very much for joining us. This is Steve Raye saying thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Get U.S. Market Ready with Italian Wine People.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode brought to you by the Wine to Wine Business Forum 2022. This year will mark the 9th edition of the forum, to be held on November 7th and 8th, 2022, in Verona, Italy. Remember, the second early bird discount on tickets will be available until September 18th. For more information, please visit us at winetowine.net. Guys, I'm Joy Livingston, and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love, and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to italianwinepodcast.com.